Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Allison and today I'm going to talk about my fall knitting plans. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, but I'm super excited to film this video and talk a little bit about my plans for the fall. Um, as you'll know if you watch my podcast, I do still have a couple of long-term whips that are sitting on my needles. The way I'm kind of looking at this is that I'm going to dedicate the rest of September to finishing up those projects that have been sitting on my needles for a little while. The Moby sweater, you guys might recall, I've been working on since February. So hopefully clearing my needles, and then I will use October, November, December as my fall period, I guess. I know fall technically ends like a couple days before Christmas. So if we're, using technicalities, then basically all the way to the end of the year is fall. So this is kind of what my plan is. I have quite a few projects that I would like to knit in this fall, I guess pre-winter season up until the new year. A lot of them have been in my queue for quite some time, and almost everything that is on my list I will be knitting from stash. So plenty of the yarn that I have for these projects is yarn that has been in my stash for anywhere from like 6 months to 2.5 years. So very excited to hopefully dive into this and get through some of this stash yarn. I haven't been knitting super quickly this year. I think over the summer my knitting typically tends to slow down, as I know is the case for many other knitters as well. um, Summer knitting is not typically my favorite. I'll make one or two garments every year and that's about it. So a lot of the yarn that I had hoped to get through this year, all of my big stash busting goals are definitely falling short. So I'm not going to put too much pressure on myself to knit, 8, 9, 10 different projects before the end of the year just to get through this stash. But I would like to make more of a conscious effort to work with what I have before purchasing new. And I think I've done that for the most part. I went on a big trip this past May, June, where I did buy a little bit of yarn. But apart from that, I really have not been purchasing yarn, with the exception of the Knitting for Olive fundraiser that they did just a couple weeks ago. But I've been mostly very good with not spending money on yarn and hope to continue that into the new year as well. So anything that I don't get around to this fall will, of course, be carried into my winter plans. But anyway, I will stop rambling and I'll just jump into my plans. I will start first and foremost with one that I've actually already cast on. I'm not planning on doing too much work on this before I finish the rest of the whips that I've got going. I just really had an itch to cast on a new fall plan on September 1st. So I did that. I got it out of my system. I knitted a few rows. Last weekend we were watching some football and I, sat down and was working on this because football's not necessarily something I have to pay too much attention to, like the plot of a movie or a TV show. So I was able to dedicate some time to actually looking at the intricacies of this pattern. But this is one that I've been talking about for a long time. I bought the yarn for this back in, I think, January of this year. My initial plan was to knit it over the spring and summer and have it ready for fall. Of course, that did not happen. So now I'm just hoping to knit it in the fall, have it ready for winter. But that is the Dagmar jacket by PetiteKnit. A very popular pattern. I'm sure at this point people are tired of hearing me saying that I'm going to cast it on, because I have been talking about it for so long. But I got the yarn, like I said, earlier this year, and I knitted a swatch very shortly after receiving the yarn. So this is the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino held with their soft silk mohair, both in the color Marzipan, which is sort of like a beigey kind of white color. It's definitely more white than beige. I do tend to like how this looks against my skin a little bit more than the beige color I was using earlier this year for my Monday sweater. But I wanted something that wasn't super stark white. So I was between this one and the cream. I hadn't seen either of these in person before. I purchased these from the Knitting for Olive website directly. But I am happy with the color and I think they knit up very nicely. I had to stretch this swatch quite a bit to get gauge, so I wasn't sure if I should go up a needle size when I started knitting it. I ultimately decided not to. And I also decided to stick with the size medium rather than the size large because I had seen that some people say that it runs a little bit oversized. So I'm hoping that all goes well with the fit. I heard some people had some complaints about the armholes being, I can't remember if they were too large for the size of the sleeve or too small. I think it might have been that the holes were too large for the size of the sleeve. So that's something I will look into when I get to that point. But like I said, this is not really a priority right now. I just had the itch to cast it on. And all I have is this. So I'm still working the back panel, increasing while working up this honeycomb cable stitch. I had never done a honeycomb cable before knitting this swatch, and it is definitely a lot easier than I had anticipated it being. Which is great. It's definitely a lot of cabling. So I'd love to learn how to get a little bit more comfortable with cabling without a cable needle. But for the meantime, it's perfectly doable. The only modification I'm making to this for now, as far as I know, is that the original pattern, these little diamond shapes here, have purl stitches inside that sort of match the pearls that are sitting out here. I saw, I believe it was Morgan from Morgan Unraveled who knit the Dagmar jacket or the Dagmar zipper sweater and decided to change the little diamond area to be moss stitch instead of just pearls, just to sort of give it a little bit extra dimension. And I think that looks really good. You can't tell yet. Haven't reached that point yet on my actual project. But the charts were easy enough to modify in this way so that when I get there, I'm not confused and I know when to knit and purl. And I think that was a really nice little change to make that ultimately I think has a fairly big impact. I like that it differentiates these sections from one another, especially because this is not a super like scratchy, fluffy yarn, so you can really see the detail of the stitches. So I just like to have that little bit of differentiation there. But otherwise, I don't really have too much to say about this pattern at this point. I'm like maybe 15 rows in. So once I get a little bit further along, I will of course share my journey. But I just wanted to finally cast this on because I've been talking about it forever. So very excited about the Dagmar jacket, and hopefully it doesn't take me a year to knit. This next plan is also one that I've mentioned in the past. I don't remember if it was my spring knitting plans or maybe I've just mentioned it in the planning portion of my podcasts, but I have been wanting to make a Lakes pullover by Ozetta forever. And particularly what sort of pushed me over the edge in deciding what color I wanted to use was when I saw Jessica from Those Twins Who Knit, who made her Lakes pullover in a beautiful bright red. I believe she used the red currant color from Knitting for Olive. I could be wrong. I just fell in love, and I knew that I wanted a bright red sweater. I've knit quite a bit with red, but I tend to favor the darker kind of wine Bordeaux sort of shades of red. So I went ahead, I think, it's been a year at this point, but I purchased this yarn. This is Knit Picks Palette. You have heard me talk about this yarn a million and one times. It is a fingering weight yarn. I plan on holding these double. And the shade I purchased is Pimento. So it's sort of like a very true red, maybe leans almost a little bit toward like a bluey red, like a cooler toned red, I would say. It's definitely leaning a little bit more blue than orange, if that makes any sense. I just think this is a very nice, well constructed, basic sweater that will be very easy to wear and style, even in a super bright, bold color like this. I love the saddle shoulder detail. I've been working up the Paul cardigan by Moreca Knit, which has a similar saddle shoulder construction. and I've really been enjoying that. I like how it looks. I like how it knits up. And Ozetta is a designer from whom I've knit multiple patterns in the past. Most recently, my Sadie sweater, which is one of my favorite and most worn sweaters. And she's just a great pattern writer and designer, and I really do gravitate toward a lot of her designs. So I'm quite happy to support her and purchase another pattern of hers, and just really excited to own this Lykke pullover. It's another one that I've been talking about for a long time. I bought the yarn for it a while ago. I just didn't feel called to knit on this pretty rustic, I guess, sweater throughout the summer. Palette, like I've said, I've used many, many times before. It is a little bit rougher. I find that it does soften with blocking, but if you are sensitive to, I guess, rougher or scratchier yarns, you may not like this one. It's worth, seeing for yourself if you enjoy how this feels. It's definitely not the scratchiest yarn I've ever used by any means, but I've used it time and time again, tried and true. Excellent color range, great price point. So you really can't go wrong, I think. This will be like my 5th project knitted with palette. So yeah, I'm excited to use it again. And that's all I've got to say. My next plan is another sweater, another plain, mostly stockinette sweater. But this is another pattern that I've owned for quite some time now and never found the right time to cast it on. But I have decided to prioritize knitting this. Another one that I've had the yarn for in my stash for quite some time. And that is the Eun Sweater by NovemberKnits. And I am going to make it in this beautiful chocolatey brown color. This is another Knit Picks yarn. This is their Wool of the Andes worsted. I have used this one as well. Off the top of my head, the most recent time I used this was when I made my Lume pullover by Sari Nordland last year. An excellent yarn for color work. This is the shade Chocolate, so pretty much describes what the color looks like here. And the Eun Sweater is another one that I don't know that I necessarily need to talk too much about because, again, it's a very popular pattern, but this pattern is designed by NovemberKnits. It's a very unique stockinette sweater in the sense that you finish knitting the stockinette portion quite high up on the body and then go into a split hem where you have quite a significant portion of 2x2 ribbing down the front and back. Which makes it a very flowy, sort of unique looking basic, which I really like. I think I love my plain stockinette, tried and true, trusted sweaters, like the Lykke pullover, like the Monday sweater that I finished recently. But it is always fun to make something that isn't a super high commitment in the sense of there's no lace or color work or cabling, but there is still kind of a striking detail about it that sets it apart from other designs. And I do really enjoy that about this sweater in particular. This sweater also has quite a unique raglan shaping towards the top rather than just having, 2 or 3 standard raglan stitches here in the 4 corners. It sort of alternates between purl and knit stitches to give sort of a unique look as well to the sweater. I think I purchased this pattern almost 2 years ago. I know this designer does pattern sales quite frequently, so I purchased this pattern back when, I guess sort of impulsively when a sale was happening. But I'm glad that I finally found the time to fit it in, and it's really been calling to me, so I am very excited to cast this on. I think it's going to look excellent in this brown color. I have really felt drawn toward brown in this year. I mean, I have a lot of brown tops that I've been wearing. I'm knitting on a brown project right now for my husband, so I'm really excited to have my own hand knitted brown item because I have not made myself anything in this color yet, and I just know that it's going to get a ton of wear. It's versatile, it'll go with anything. It's a great neutral basic to have. So I'm very excited for this Eun sweater. It's different from anything I've worked on before, so I'm quite excited. My next fall knitting plan is a far more recent addition to the list. This pattern was released, I think, only about a month ago, but as soon as I saw it, I knew I have to knit this. The designer posted a photo of it before the pattern was even released, and I saved it on Instagram, and I said, as soon as this is out, I will be casting this on. Um, it's gonna go a little bit further down on my list of priorities just because there are some things here that have been waiting for a long time to get their moment, but I'm so excited to cast this on. And this project is the Forget Me Not jumper by Florence Miller, also known as Handmade by Florence on YouTube. I've never knit a pattern from Florence before, but I've been watching her on YouTube for years now, and I've always enjoyed her content, and I just think that this design is absolutely stunning. I dipped my feet into color work for the first time last year when I knit my Lumi pullover, which I mentioned before, and I absolutely loved it. I thought the process was very fun. I went through the entire sweater in about 3.5 weeks, just because I loved getting to the next row and the next row and seeing that motif sort of come together. And the finished product was obviously absolutely stunning. I admittedly haven't worn it too much since Christmas because it is a very Christmassy sweater. Um, but I just would love to incorporate more color work. And I think this is the perfect opportunity for that because I think this motif is absolutely stunning. So, all that said, I'm going to show you a yarn you've seen many times before on my channel. It's Palette, spoiler alert. But I purchased a sweater quantity of this palette from Knit Picks in the color Gosling several years ago now. The intention for this was to knit the Jenny Jacket V-neck by PetiteKnit. I knit up a swatch for it in a different color of palette actually, and it's sitting right here. And it is admittedly very stunning, a very striking, unique pattern. I just sort of lost the desire to knit up the Jenny jacket for myself at this point in time. And so this yarn has been sitting in my stash without a project in mind for quite a while. Once I saw Florence's sample of this sweater, I knew that I wanted to stay as true to her original colorway as possible. So she's using a white base, and then she has pink, green, and blue accent colors. But I didn't want to purchase new yarn just for this, and because I already had a sweater quantity of this light gray, I figured this would, fit the bill just fine. I don't tend to wear much light gray, but I think having that little colorwork motif at the top would be nice to break it up a little bit and add some interest to what otherwise would have just been a plain gray sweater. So for the accent colors, there are two that I'm certain of. There's one that I'm not sure about. So in Florence's original sample, she uses 3 accent colors. She has also done a second sample that only has 2. So I'm still sort of in between whether I want to use 2 or 3 accent colors. But I know for sure that I want to use these 2 in some capacity. The first one, also palette. This is in the color Lichen. I purchased this 2 winters ago and I used it to knit a hat and scarf set. I ended up panic buying another ball of this yarn when I thought I was going to run out when I was knitting the scarf. Turns out I didn't need the extra ball of yarn, and I also still have a whole other ball of yarn left over. So definitely have more of this left over than I needed, but not quite enough to do anything significant with. So I figured what better way to use it up than as an accent color in a color work piece. So this will be the stem and leaf color in that pattern. And the third color that I know I want to use is the shade Victorian, also palette from Knit Picks. And this is the color I would use for the flowers. I love these two together. I think that's really cool. I don't know that I would necessarily knit up a garment in just these 2 colors. I think having the gray to sort of soften it out works really nicely. I know I want to use the pink in the same places that Florence used the pink in her sample. What I'm unsure of still is what I'm going to do for those blue areas. I do have a lot of other palette scraps left over. Obviously, I have this red. I don't know that I necessarily like this red with these. but I have used palette many times before. I have a couple shades of brown that could work. I have an orange I'm not too sure about, but I'm gonna go through my palette scraps and see if there's anything that could be usable for this. It appears to be the smallest part of the color work, and so would probably require the least amount of meterage. So I don't think I need a whole ton of it, but I just want to make sure that I have something in my stash that will actually look nice. Otherwise, I'm not against following sort of what she did in her second sample, which was using this color for the leaves and then doing both sets of flowers in this pink. I just think that these three together will look gorgeous. It's definitely more of a spring color palette, and so I can see this one potentially being pushed if I don't have time to start it right away in the fall. But I think I would like to work on it in the fall and winter and have it ready for like February, March, April. I think this would be such a gorgeous springtime sweater. So I'm really, really excited to jump into more color work. I've been saying for a year now since knitting the Lumi sweater that I want to do more color work, and I haven't done any since. So I really would like to make it a goal of mine to at least once a year knit up a nice, a little bit more intricate color work yoke garment, or maybe all over color work. We'll see if I eventually get brave enough to try one of those. But yeah, for now, these are the three that I have in mind for the Forget Me Not jumper. It's just a gorgeous pattern. I wouldn't be surprised if I saw tons of people knitting it very soon because it came out very recently and it's just stunning. Another slightly newer plan on this list is the Charlie pullover by Moreca Knit. I did mention this in my last podcast episode. I'm currently knitting another pattern by Moreca Knit, the Paul cardigan. I think it's incredibly well written. I really am liking how the garment is shaping up. And so this other pattern by Moreca Knit that I've had in my favorites for a while, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to actually make a concrete plan to knitting it. This one, more so than some of the others on my list, definitely gives me more fall vibes than winter, so it might be one that I decide to kind of push up the list of priorities. I've never knit anything with this kind of collar design before, and I've always been intrigued. I remember when the Elizabeth blouse by PetiteKnit came out, I really wanted to knit that. I had seen some people do modifications on other collared patterns that was really drawn to, and so now I've decided I do want to commit in making this. And the yarn that I will be using for that is very special. It is the Knitting for Olive Merino and their soft silk mohair, both in the color Claret. I have worked with Knitting for Olive a couple of times. I have enjoyed it every single time, but their yarns can tend to be a little bit pricier than what I usually like to spend on yarn, which is why I do gravitate toward Knit Picks, for example. I find their yarn is very affordable, but every once in a while I do like to treat myself to some Knitting for Olive, like I will be doing with my Dagmar jacket. And this was a recent purchase from the fundraiser. And again, it's a color that I've had my eye on for a long, long time, ever since I discovered Knitting for Olive. So I am quite excited to finally have my hands on it. The mohair is very soft, as everyone says. The merino I have used before in several garments. I knit my husband a hat out of just this merino held double in the Bordeaux color, and he wears it every day in the winter and it has not pilled a single time. So it's definitely worth the hype. It is as good as people say. And I think held with the mohair is going to be a really nice combination. I know that this is an extremely popular combination. I myself have never knit anything with these two exact yarns held together. So I'm really excited to see what all the hype is about and excited to own my own garment with these two yarns. I think it'll be a really beautiful piece. I've seen other people actually on Ravelry who've knit this exact pattern in this exact yarn combination and color. So that sort of got me excited to make this as well. And overall, just again, another beautiful pattern. I forgot to mention, I know the sample does have stripes. I will be knitting this solid, so just in this red color here. And that's really all I have to say about this one. This, like I said, might jump up a little bit in my list of priorities. My last knitting plan that I have the yarn with me for is a shawl. I have not yet decided on exactly which shawl I want to make, but my reasoning behind wanting to make a shawl is primarily that it is freezing in my office. I go and work from the office twice a week, and it is always very cold in there, no matter the time of year. And so I will bring sweaters with me, but I constantly find myself taking them on and off. Cardigans are great for this too, but I think having a shawl would be really nice that I can wear to the office as a scarf and then use sort of as a wrap when it gets cold in the office and I just want that little extra layer. There are a couple options that I've been looking at. The one that is leading the charge right now is the Boneyard shawl by Stephen West. It's a fairly simple design, and that's something that I am looking for in this shawl in particular. I'm so sorry, I've got like mohair flying around everywhere. I think this really simple textured design will be perfect for what I'm looking for. I know there are tons of very intricate, beautiful shawl patterns out there. Maybe one day I will get to that, but for right now, I just want something that is fairly basic, but maybe a little level higher than the Sophie shawl that I've knit before. The yarn I'm considering using for this has been in my stash for a bit. I initially purchased it to make the Tonight top by Lily Kate Makes. That plan sort of fell a little bit down the list of priorities for me. Then I decided I was going to use it for the Maggie cardigan by PetiteKnit and hold it with a mohair that I purchased specifically for the Maggie cardigan. And then I got cold feet about knitting a short-sleeved cardigan when I am already somebody who gets hot very easily. So I think the safest way to use this yarn would be in some kind of a shawl. I'm using these gray colors here. So very neutral, they'll go with any jacket I'm wearing. They don't perfectly match, but I think they're close enough that it won't look terrible. It definitely looks like these colors are further apart from one another on the camera, but in real life they do look a little bit closer in shade. This yarn here is the line weight from Purl Soho. I cannot remember the color because I don't have the ball band anymore, but I will look it up and put it on the screen. And this is, once again, Knit Picks. This is their Aloft mohair yarn in the color Carbon. Another mohair that I haven't used before, but is very, very soft and actually quite similar to the Knitting for Olive one, I would say. I would say that the Knit Picks is a little bit fluffier and almost feels a little bit softer than the Knitting for Olive, but we'll see once they're knitted up. Maybe I'll do a little comparison. But yeah, I think these two will be great for a shawl. I definitely have enough in my stash, and I'm trying to be a little bit less precious about the yarn that I have in stash. I think there are a lot of yarns that I've had for quite some time that I've been waiting for the perfect project for, and I haven't wanted to knit up like any old accessory or sweater just for no reason. I wanted to really find a special project for them. But at the end of the day, I want to use the yarn I have in my stash. It's not doing me any good just sitting there collecting dust. So I figured it's time to use this, get it out of my stash. This one I've had for almost 2 years now. So it'll be really nice to just get them out of the stash. A shawl is something I'm going to use probably almost every single day. So I think it'll be a great use of this yarn. And I won't feel guilty about having it sitting on my shelf. My very last plan for now is the only one that I don't actually have yarn for. I possibly have yarn for it in my stash. I just don't know which yarn I want to use yet. And so I'm going to hold off on making any kind of decision right now. But this is one that was in my winter knitting plans last year that I never got around to making. And so I really want to prioritize it this year. And that is the Simple Knit Hood by Lykke. This is just a very simple, as the name suggests, standard hood balaclava pattern. I don't remember where I saw this for the first time. It might have been Woozy by Celine. Don't quote me on that. But I think it is a really beautiful, simple knit hood. Again, like the name. I have a huge winter parka that I wear quite often when it is very cold and snowy outside. But for days when it is not as aggressively Canadian winter, I have a nice trench coat that I wear a lot. And I last year knitted some fingerless gloves. I made the penny gloves by PetiteKnit to wear with that coat, and I love how they look together. And the original plan was to also knit a matching hood. I ended up not getting enough yarn to knit both the hood and the gloves for the simple reason that I bought this yarn while I was in Boston this past January, and it was a little bit too expensive to justify getting enough to make both. And there also were only 2 skeins in the colorway that I wanted. But it was a gorgeous yarn. I couldn't leave it behind. I wanted fingerless gloves made out of like a cashmere blend. So I went ahead and I got them, and I decided I would just knit the hood out of something else. My instinct is telling me that I want to make this out of some kind of a wine burgundy sort of dark red color to match those fingerless gloves. Still undecided. I think in another neutral color it could look just as nice, but we will sort of see. Once I assess kind of what I have in my stash, I might make a decision based on that, or maybe I will find a special yarn somewhere that I want to purchase that I can use to make this. I just know that I've been wanting a hood slash balaclava for a while. I think this would be a really quick, easy knit to do while I'm kind of out and about, or I need something mindless to work on. And I just think it's a beautiful pattern and I would love to have it. This is one that might be, like a late December cast on, maybe over Christmas holiday or something. We'll see. But definitely something that I do want to make sure I get around to this year because of the simplicity, and you can never have too many winter accessories when you live in Canada. So I would love to constantly be adding to that collection of mine. All right, that is it for my fall knitting plans for 2025. I think it's probably a little bit ambitious considering the rate at which I've been knitting my other patterns that I've been working on, but we're gonna see. I'm not sort of gonna hold too tight to any of these ideas. I know that things change. My knitting mojo might go up and down, and I'm giving myself space to be okay with that and just knit when I feel like it and not knit when I don't feel like it. But I think I have a really great set of plans that really excite me for this fall season. So I am looking forward to knitting every single one of these patterns. And of course, we'll document my progress on my podcast and on my Instagram as well. So if you're not following me on Instagram, feel free. My handle is the same as my username here, just with a dot in between the W and the K. So it's amw.knits. I'm trying to update a little bit more on Instagram. I used to be very active. I think over the summer I sort of fell off a little bit, but I'd love to get back into it. So if you're not already following me there, I would love to have you. Also, feel free to subscribe to my channel if you liked what you saw and want some updates on how these projects are going throughout the fall season. And let me know what you're planning on knitting this fall. Are you doing any of the same projects as me? Because that would be really fun to see if other people sort of had the same ideas as me. And I would love to know what color you're knitting them in, what yarn you're using. I just love hearing about people's knitting plans, which is why I love watching these videos. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am grateful as always, and I will see you next time.